Another member of the NHL's greatest team, as voted by the fans, Mark Napier, who got to the Oilers just in time in 84-85. What was that like, Mark, coming to Edmonton and contributing well to a Stanley Cup championship?
Thank you. You talk about there being someone up above looking after you. It was, I was at the time playing for a pretty decent Minnesota team. I think we went to the semifinals against the Oilers the first year when they won the Cup, and then got traded there the next year. But yeah, it was probably one of the nicest calls I'd had in a long, long time. It was Lou Nanne called me into his office after one of the games and said, I got Glenn Saylor on the phone, wants to talk to you. And by the way, I've traded to the Edmonton Oilers. So that was a very pleasant conversation with Mr. Saylor that day. And the next morning, actually, my brother-in-law, Patty Hughes, picked me up at the airport. And then to have the chance to win the Stanley Cup, for me, a second time was pretty special.
Speaking of guys like Pat Hughes, what was that group like to you, and how did they welcome you in?
Oh, it was pretty special. They're such a great group of guys, and I got really lucky. Right away, Glenn put me out with Glenn Anderson and Mark Napier on that line, and I thought I was in pretty decent shape till I played with those two guys, and I found out that I better get in shape pretty quick to try and keep up with them. But and I used to think I was pretty quick too till I played with them. But the whole team, it was just they'd won the Cup the year before, and just such a great group of guys. It was for me basically to be welcomed with open arms the way they did. It just shows the character of the team and how special they were.
What was it like to play against them?
Well, the first taste I really got of the Oilers was I was playing for the Montreal Canadiens. I believe it was '81. We finished third overall, and back then they had pairings, so one played 16, two played 15. And of all the bottom teams, it came right down to the end for if the Oilers or Hartford and a bunch of teams were going to make the playoffs that year.
Right.
And the one team we didn't want to meet was Edmonton. And sure enough, they finished, I think, 14th. We finished third, and I think they beat us 3 straight, and they handled us. And we were a pretty decent team, obviously to finish third overall that year.
Absolutely.
But I still remember playing against them, and they were really young, and just the way they played the fire wagon, and they were having a lot of fun, and maybe a little immature at that point. But boy, they could play, and obviously it translated a couple years later to winning the Cup.
How were those playoffs for you, and what do you remember vividly about them?
It's funny when you're right in the thick of it. You kind of it's day to day, and you go through it. But thinking back, the first 2 rounds, I don't think we lost the game. I think we beat was it L.A. and then Vancouver, and then
you run into the Hawks.
Then we ran into the Hawks in the first 2 games against the Hawks. I think we blew them out both games. I think so. I don't think we thought it was going to be easy, but they sure surprised us Game 3 and Game 4 in Chicago, and I think it kind of gave us a little wake-up call that we had to really bear down, especially going into Game 6 in their building, because we sure you never want to go to a Game 7. So I think we played a really good game in Game 6 to beat them in there, and then the finals, obviously the first game in Philly was a bit of a wake-up call for us. I remember it was hot and the ice wasn't very good, and nobody made any excuses, but I don't think we played very well.
Everyone talks about that Game 1 and says that that's kind of where the turning point was.
Yeah, and then I think Game 2 could have been our best game of the series, because back then it was 2-3-2, so we knew we were going back home for 3 games, and we certainly didn't want to go back to Philly to play. So once we got home, we got pretty comfortable and played pretty well there.
What's the celebration, in your opinion, going to be like at Rogers Place on February 11th? I know it's great to have the guys from the Boys on the Bus gang and everyone else and in between, but what do you think that night's going to be like at Rogers Place with all those fans there in attendance as well?
I think it'll be very special. It's, I know we loved our time at Edmonton. My wife and I have always talked about it. If I would have finished my career there, we'd probably still be living there. We liked it so much. And the nice thing, the wives will be invited back, and it'll be nice for them too to share in it, and for us to get together. And it's a funny thing with hockey players. You might not see a guy for 15 or 20 years, and you see him, and it's like you never missed a beat. Right. So I'm sure we'll pick up the the banter and the locker room chatter, and we'll have a great time.
Mark, thank you for this. Look forward to seeing you there.
Thanks, Tom.